You know what makes being ghosted so painful is that it feels deeply personal. Someone you connected with, maybe even started to imagine a future with, just disappeared. No explanation, no closure. And the silence somehow says everything and nothing at the same time. Your mind goes on overdrive. Was it something I said? Was I too much, not enough? Did I misread the whole thing? We start dissecting every text, every moment, looking for what we missed. But let me tell you the truth that's hard to swallow in the moment, but liberating once it sinks in. Being ghosted is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity to show up, to communicate, to be real. That pain you're feeling, it's not about you being unlovable or not good enough. It's about them not being capable or willing of facing the discomfort that comes with honesty. And that's not something you can control. We tend to internalize people's bad behavior as a verdict on ourselves. But when someone disappears without a word, it's not a deep statement about your flaws. It's a loud statement about their emotional immaturity. People who are capable of real connection, they don't ghost, they communicate. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard, and yes, rejection still stings, even when it's done respectfully. But at least it gives you clarity. Ghosting leaves a vacuum. And the hardest part about a vacuum is that we rush to fill it with stories, assumptions, insecurities. Maybe they just got busy. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe I scared them off by caring too much. We create these narratives that keep us emotionally tied to someone who has already walked away. And let's be honest, most of the time, we're not trying to understand them. We're trying to rescue our own ego. When someone ghosts us, what we're really mourning isn't always the person. It's the validation we thought we were getting from them. The feeling that we mattered, that we were chosen. And when that disappears, we start questioning our own value. But that's dangerous territory. Because once your self-worth becomes tied to someone else's attention or absence, you're no longer in control. You've handed the keys over to someone who didn't even bother to say goodbye. So here's the shift. Instead of asking, why didn't they want me? Ask, why would I want someone who disappears when things get real? Because that's what ghosting is. It's an exit strategy when vulnerability becomes inconvenient. And that's not a trait you want in someone who's meant to stand beside you in life. You want someone who leans in when things get uncomfortable, not someone who slips out the back door. I know it's tempting to think back on the good moments, to replay that chemistry, the laughter, the connection. But don't let isolated moments override the full picture. Someone can make you feel incredible in short bursts and still not be the kind of person who shows up when it matters. A great beginning doesn't mean a great partnership. There are a lot of people who know how to start something, fewer know how to stay for it. And when you've been ghosted, it can rattle your ability to trust not just other people, but your own instincts. You start doubting your judgment. How did I not see this coming? But here's what I want you to understand. You didn't make a mistake in caring. You weren't wrong for being open. You weren't foolish for hoping. The person who ghosts you doesn't make you naive. They reveal themselves. They show you that they weren't up to the standard of emotional maturity you deserve. It's a brutal kind of clarity, but it is clarity. And instead of blaming yourself, the power move is to thank the experience, not because it was pleasant, but because it showed you something valuable early on. Imagine if this same person had waited until you were even more invested. Ghosting at any stage hurts, but a disappearing act after years of emotional commitment, that's a scar that takes even longer to heal. So don't wish it had lasted longer. Don't wish you could go back and do something differently. The way someone leaves tells you everything you need to know about how they would have stayed. And that's not someone you want to fight for. That's someone you walk away from with your dignity, your heart, and your standards intact. You're not for everyone. And that's not a weakness, it's your strength. Because when the right person comes along, they're not going to vanish when things get real. They're going to show up. They'll have the courage to speak the hard truths, to express what they feel, even when it's not easy. And in the meantime, your job isn't to chase closure or fix someone else's emotional mess. Your job is to hold onto your self-respect, to remember who you are before someone came into your life and made you question it. You don't need someone's words to feel whole again. You need your own presence, your own truth, and your own love. They may have disappeared without a word, but you walk away with your power. You may never get the why you crave. And that's one of the hardest parts about being ghosted, isn't it? It's the silence, the vanishing act, the absence of an explanation that leaves you spinning in your head, asking yourself 100 questions. Was it something I said? Did I come on too strong? Did they meet someone else? And we drive ourselves crazy, trying to piece together the puzzle with no edge pieces and no picture on the box. But here's the truth. Closure doesn't always come in the way we expect. It doesn't always arrive as a neat, respectful message explaining someone's feelings. Sometimes closure is what you give yourself. And that's powerful because when you stop waiting for someone else to hand you peace, you begin to reclaim your control. See, when we're ghosted, we go hunting for meaning. That's normal. We're wired to seek patterns, to make sense of things. The problem is, in the absence of a real explanation, we tend to create one that punishes us. We assume the worst. I wasn't interesting enough. I said the wrong thing. I'm not attractive enough. They lost interest because of who I am. But what if the meaning isn't that you weren't good enough, but that this person wasn't ready for someone like you? Instead of spiraling into self-blame, ask a better question. What does this teach me about what I value, about what I want? You can create meaning that uplifts rather than meaning that diminishes. That's where your strength comes from. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't hurt. Of course it does. You felt something, you were excited, you were vulnerable, and then suddenly, without warning, that connection was ripped away with no explanation. That's jarring. It makes you doubt your judgment. And part of the pain is that loss of momentum. Those late night conversations, the shared laughs, the plans that never got to happen. But be honest, how much of that were you building on potential rather than reality? How much were you hoping they'd become the person you imagined instead of seeing the signs of flakiness, of inconsistency, of emotional unavailability? Here's the thing. When someone ghosts you, they make a statement. Even if they say nothing, they're telling you what their conflict resolution style is. They're showing you how they handle discomfort. You don't need a paragraph from them. You've already got all the information you need. What you do with that information is up to you. You can wait around, hoping they'll return with an apology, or you can say, I deserve more than silence. I deserve someone who communicates, even when it's hard. Because real connection isn't just about the good moments. It's about how someone shows up when things get uncertain, when feelings get complicated, when honesty is required. That's when character is revealed. And someone who disappears instead of engaging in that process has done you a strange favor. They've shown you early on that they're not equipped for the level of relationship you're ready for. Let's also talk about the fantasy, because when you're ghosted, you're not just grieving the person, you're grieving what could have been. And if you're not careful, you'll build that fantasy up to something epic. They were perfect. We had insane chemistry. This could have been something special, but it's important to challenge that. Did they truly show up for you? Were they consistent? Did they match your effort, your vulnerability, your emotional depth? Or were they just shiny in the beginning and vague later? We can't build relationships on sparks alone. We build them on mutual commitment, on follow-through, on the unsexy but beautiful act of consistently choosing each other. So when you're looking for closure, stop waiting for their explanation and start writing your own. Not the story where you weren't enough, but the one where you're growing, where this situation made you more self-aware, where it sharpened your instincts, where it taught you to recognize early signs of emotion avoidance. That's the meaning you get to create. And that kind of meaning is something no one can take from you. It's not easy. It's never going to feel good when someone leaves without a word. But healing doesn't come from their return. It comes from your decision to stop giving your energy to someone who isn't even present. It comes from choosing not to give your peace of mind to someone who didn't even have the courage to say goodbye. So let them disappear. Let them be silent. That silence, it's your cue. Your cue to move forward, to grow stronger, to raise your standards, not lower your spirit. Let this be the moment you stop needing an ending written by someone else and start writing your own. Being ghosted can feel like one of the most brutal forms of rejection. It's confusing, it's abrupt, and it leaves you with no roadmap for how to process it. 1 minute, you're texting, laughing, sharing things about your life, and the next, silence. No explanation, no closure, just gone. In moments like that, it's so easy to spiral. You start asking yourself questions you'll never get the answers to. Did I do something wrong? Were they ever even interested? Was any of it real? And the more you sit in that space, the deeper the pain cuts. It feels like someone reached inside you, flipped a switch, and suddenly your sense of confidence, your peace of mind, even your belief in people, vanished with them. But here's something we forget when we're hurting. Rejection isn't always about us. In fact, most of the time, it's not. And ghosting, that's not rejection in the traditional sense. That's avoidance. That's someone choosing the path of least resistance instead of being honest. And while that can hurt deeply, it also gives you something incredible, important information. It shows you who they are and what they're not ready for. Now, this is where your mindset matters more than anything, because the way you interpret being ghosted will either lead you toward growth or trap you in a cycle of self-doubt. And one of the most powerful shifts you can make is to stop calling it rejection and start calling it redirection. When someone ghosts you, your brain tells you, I wasn't good enough. But what if the truth is that person simply wasn't right for you? What if their exit, as painful as it felt, was actually the best thing that could have happened? I know that sounds like a stretch when you're still checking your phone, wondering why they disappeared. But think about this. Do you want to build something real with someone who doesn't even have the courage to communication? You don't. You want a partner who shows up, who doesn't vanish when things get uncomfortable, who respects your time, your vulnerability, your heart. Ghosting is never a quality of someone emotionally mature or relationship ready. And if someone isn't in a place where they can handle healthy connection, then their absence isn't just a loss, it's a blessing in disguise. Sometimes we're so focused on the idea of them that we don't see what life just spared us from. We're caught up in the highlight reel of the connection. We remember the chemistry, the late night talks, the way they made us feel seen, maybe for the first time in a while. But real intimacy is not built on fleeting moments. It's built on consistency, respect, communication, none of which includes disappearing. And if they left, what they've really done is made room for something better, room for someone who's actually ready. But we don't create space for that kind of person when we're stuck staring at the closed door, wondering why it's shut in the first place. We create it when we say, I trust that what's meant for me will stay, and what isn't, I'm strong enough to release. I get it. It's hard, especially when you didn't see it coming. It's like being in a movie and someone walks out of the theater halfway through and now you're left sitting there wondering what the ending was supposed to be. But maybe, just maybe, that person was never meant to make it to the end of your story. Maybe their only role was to help you see something you hadn't seen before. Maybe it was to wake you up to a standard you weren't holding yet. Maybe it was to remind you that your heart is valuable and not everyone deserves access to it. There's a beautiful clarity that comes when you stop chasing ghosts. You begin to recognize that your worth is not tied to someone else's decision to stay. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on who texts you back. And being ghosted doesn't mean you were too much, too intense, or not enough. It just means they weren't capable of handling someone who was showing up with intention. So when you think about that person, instead of mourning the potential, ask yourself, what was I really investing in? Was it the fantasy of who they could be, or was it the reality of how they actually showed up? That answer alone can be incredibly freeing, because often what we're upset about isn't the loss of something real, it's the loss of what we hoped it would turn into. But the moment you reframe that experience as redirection, everything changes. Instead of obsessing over why they disappeared, you start focusing on what you deserve. Instead of begging the universe for answers, you begin trusting that it just protected you from more confusion down the road. And instead of staying stuck in the pain of what didn't work, you get excited about what still might. You didn't get rejected, you got rerouted. And now you have a choice. You can stay stuck, trying to figure out the mind of someone who lacked the courage to speak to you. Or you can rise, walk forward, and open yourself to the kind of love that doesn't vanish when things get real. Because the right person doesn't ghost you, they choose you every single day. No response is a very loud one. And I want you to really take that in, because in the moment when someone ghosts us, our mind can go into overdrive trying to decode the silence. We replay the last conversation, we obsess over our last text. We even go back weeks or months thinking, was there something I missed? Something I said wrong? Did I come on too strong or not strong enough? That mental loop is exhausting, and it's driven by one thing: the hope that if we just understood why they disappeared, the pain would hurt less. But here's the truth: silence is communication. It might not be the form of communication we want, but it speaks volumes. And the message is loud and clear. They chose not to engage. They chose not to give you the decency of a conversation, an explanation, or even a sentence. That tells you something crucial, and it's this: they don't have the emotional maturity to face discomfort. Because that's what ghosting really is: someone avoiding discomfort at the expense of your clarity and your dignity. See, when someone disappears without a word, it's rarely because you were too much. More often, it's because they weren't enough. Not enough courage to be honest. Not enough respect to say, hey, I don't think this is working for me. Not enough emotional bandwidth to have a grown-up conversation. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's also freeing, because the moment you stop interpreting silence as rejection of your worth and start seeing it as a revelation of their limitations, you stop blaming yourself. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but we had such a strong connection. Things were going so well. How could someone just vanish like that? That's the most painful part, right? When everything seemed fine, when you thought you were both on the same page. And it's easy in those moments to fall into the trap of thinking, if I could just get them to explain, if I could just get them to respond, maybe I'd feel better. But let me ask you something. If someone doesn't care enough to send a message, why would you trust that any explanation they give you now would be honest or even helpful? Why would you chase clarity from someone who's already shown you they're willing to disappear the moment things get uncomfortable? People who value communication don't ghost. People who respect others don't ghost. And people who are emotionally ready for a relationship don't ghost. It's that simple. And I say that not to make you bitter, but to make you better at recognizing who's actually capable of showing up for you. Because this isn't just about ghosting. It's about the standard you hold yourself to when it comes to love. When you internalize the idea that no response is a response, you free yourself from waiting. You stop standing at the door of someone who walked away without shutting it. You stop giving your energy to someone who gave you nothing but silence. And instead, you start saying, I deserve communication. I deserve clarity. I deserve someone who doesn't vanish when things get real. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop needing an answer and start listening to the one you've already received. Their silence isn't a cliffhanger, it's a conclusion. It's not a mystery to solve, it's a statement. And what you do next says everything about your self-worth. You can either make their silence the loudest voice in your life, or you can let it be the turning point that says, from now on, I only invest in people who invest back. I don't chase, I choose. I don't beg for breadcrumbs, I wait for the full meal. And that doesn't mean the pain goes away overnight. Of course it hurts, of course it's confusing, and it's okay to feel the sting of that rejection, but don't mistake their disappearance as a sign that you weren't good enough. See it for what it really is, a red flag that removed itself. So let them ghost, let them go, let the silence speak. And instead of trying to make noise in the void they left behind, turn toward the people who show up, who reply, who care enough to stay. Silence isn't your enemy, it's your clarity. Let it guide you forward, not pull you back. You're not just hurting because they disappeared. You're hurting because of what you thought this could become. And that's something a lot of us don't realize when we're dealing with the pain of being ghosted. It's not just the loss of a person, it's the loss of potential, of what you imagined, what you pictured late at night when you were smiling at your phone, where you told your friends this might be. That version, the one in your mind, was beautiful, safe, romantic, full of possibility. But here's what I want you to ask yourself with brutal honesty. Were they really showing up for you? Or were you filling in the blanks? Were you holding on to fragments of a connection and spinning them into a full-blown story about who this person might be if only they stuck around long enough to become it? That's not love, that's projection. And the danger of projection is that it makes you ignore reality in favor of potential. It convinces you that the idea of someone is enough to stay emotionally invested, even when their actions scream otherwise. Think about it. How many times did you feel unsure, waiting for the next message, wondering if they were pulling away? How often did you have to interpret their silence, guess their intentions, excuse their distance, as maybe they're just busy? That's not emotional security. That's anxiety. That's inconsistency being romanticized into mystery. And let's be honest, we all do this when we like someone. We zoom in on the great moments, the sparks, the witty banter, the chemistry. We highlight all the little signs that this could be something, and we downplay the glaring ones that suggest it probably won't be. But if someone ghosts you, that is the clearest answer they could possibly give you. People who want to show up do. People who care communicate, even when it's uncomfortable. And yet, when you get ghosted, your brain doesn't always latch onto that logic. It goes straight to, what did I do wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Did I say something? Should I have waited longer to reply? And all of that is a distraction from the truth, which is they were never really ready to give you what you were ready to give them. You weren't ghosted because you were too open. You were ghosted because you offered your heart to someone who didn't know how or didn't want to take care of it. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to stop romanticizing the version of them that only existed in your head, the version that showed up consistently, that called when they said they would, that made plans and followed through. That version never existed, not really, not over time. When you stop and take a look at the full picture, you might notice the connection wasn't as solid as you thought. It had gaps. You were often confused. You were doing most of the emotional labor. You were overthinking texts, reading into pauses, trying to prove you were worth sticking around for. And if that's the case, then you weren't actually in a relationship. You were in a negotiation. one where you are trying to convince someone to choose you. And here's the thing, when you truly connect with someone who's right for you, you don't have to convince them. They want to be there. They make you feel seen. They communicate, not disappear. And they don't leave you hanging in silence when things get real. So right now, if you're struggling to let go because you think you lost something special, I want you to ask yourself, was it special or was it scarce? Because there's a big difference. Scarcity makes things feel more valuable than they actually are. It makes crumbs feel like a feast. If someone gave you just enough to keep you hopeful, but never enough to feel safe, that's not love. That's emotional bread, and your soul deserves a full meal. You're allowed to miss the person. That's normal. But what you can't afford to do is keep grieving the idea of them while ignoring what their behavior clearly communicated. It's time to break the illusion. Let the fantasy go. Don't waste another minute investing in someone who had the audacity to disappear instead of have a real conversation. They weren't ready. They weren't available. And more importantly, they weren't your person. Because your person, they don't vanish. They show up. Let them go. You know, the pain of being ghosted is real. It's sharp. It's confusing. And it's one of those things that hits you when you least expect it. One moment, everything seems to be going well. You're texting, connecting, maybe even starting to imagine where this could go. And then suddenly, nothing. Silence. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That sting you feel, that ache in your chest, that's not just about missing someone. It's about the ego being bruised, the confusion of not having control, the sudden absence of a story you are starting to build in your head. It's about rejection with no reason, and that's a kind of pain that can haunt us. But here's the thing. We can either let it define us, or we can let it refine us. Pain, when used right, is power. Ghosting often feels like it rips something away from us, our dignity, our sense of connection, our trust. But it's also handing us something in return, if we're paying attention. It's giving us an opportunity to raise our standards. It's giving us clarity, even in silence. It's giving us a mirror to look at our boundaries and ask, was I protecting myself? Or was I just hoping they'd choose me? And this is where the shift happens. You take that pain and you turn it into momentum, into insight, into a higher version of you who no longer tolerates uncertainty as the standard for connection. Because someone disappearing without a word isn't just about them being unavailable. It's about you now choosing not to entertain anyone who doesn't show up with consistency, clarity, and care. I want you to think about something. Why did this person have so much power over your emotions? Was it really about who they were? Or was it about what you projected onto them? The role you thought they could play in your life? The comfort or validation you wanted them to give you? This pain isn't just about their exit. It's about what you attach to their presence. And once you see that clearly, you begin to reclaim your power. Because no one who can vanish without explanation deserves a starring role in your story. There's also a brutal honesty we have to embrace here. Sometimes when we get ghosted, we immediately ask, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Did I say something that pushed them away? But those questions are traps. They put all the weight of the situation on you. When in reality, someone ghosting you is about their emotional cowardice. It's about their inability to face discomfort, to have mature conversations, to treat another human being with basic decency. And once you understand that, you stop making it a referendum on your worth. You see, your power lies in what you do next. Do you chase? Do you spiral in self-doubt? Or do you pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what would the version of me who respects herself or himself do right now? That version of you doesn't beg for crumbs. That version doesn't send the fifth follow-up text hoping to get some closure. That version doesn't make excuses for someone's silence. That version walks proudly, not because it didn't hurt, but because it did, and you still chose dignity. I know how tempting it is to go back, to re-engage, to try and restart something, just to feel less rejected. But that's not healing, that's just trying to escape the discomfort. Real healing comes when you sit with the pain, learn from it, and then use it to build boundaries that serve you better. You raise the bar. You don't entertain mixed signals anymore. You stop glorifying potential and start honoring consistency. And when you do that, you'll start to see ghosting differently. Not as a loss, but as a gift in brutal wrapping paper. It saved you from investing more time in someone who couldn't even send a sentence to say goodbye. It showed you what you don't want, so you can get clearer on what you do. It woke you up to the parts of yourself that still seek external validation and gave you the chance to strengthen them from the inside out. So the next time someone ghosts you, if that ever happens, again, you won't be shattered. You won't spiral. You'll simply say, "Thank you for removing yourself from the table. I'll be over here saving my seat for someone who actually knows how to have a conversation." Because that's the energy we need to carry. That's the self-respect we need to protect. That's how we take the pain and turn it into power. You don't need their explanation. You don't need their apology. You need your own commitment to stop making room for people who disappear when things get real. That's how you get over being ghosted. Not by forgetting what happened, but by remembering who the hell you are.